Okay, I am going to check my sound very quickly. I'm actually videoing from a different location that I normally do. It's the end of the school year. I work at two different schools and I'm actually in between tasks right now, but I want to make time for you. The good news is after this week, my job will slow down a whole lot. Hello, and I will have much more time for you guys. The close of the school year in public school systems is very stressful. I'm sure you guys know that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and open up the PowerPoint presentation for this week. Now, those of you who have participated with me in the weekly meetings probably have figured out they're very helpful. And I take a lot of time to try to explain the assignments, and I try to give examples of work that is not maybe the absolute best, but a strong example of a good assignment. So as always, I want to remind you to check your announcements daily. I tend to communicate at least once a week, usually on Sunday nights or Monday mornings, to sort of give you a heads up or some advice for the week to help you. If I see something in your work that concerns me, and it's something that's happening with more than one person, then it probably means I didn't explain the assignment very well or the instructions weren't very clear. So what I'll do is I'll pop up with another announcement. That's a more public way for me to share information with everyone, because St. Thomas doesn't have access to our email, but they do have access to our announcement traffic. So that's a more appropriate way for me to communicate with a large group. So let me go on to the next slide. The initial posts are due on Wednesdays based on St. Thomas's deadlines. However, I give you 24 hours after that because you may be overwhelmed after reviewing this video on a Wednesday night. I want you to be able to process the information, use the resources that I provide if you choose to, and to get your assignments posted by Thursdays at 11:59. I hope that helps you. My students in past terms have said that helps a whole lot. And your written assignments are due Saturday by 11:59, and your discussion board replies are due Sundays by 11:59, except for the last week. So I wanted to take just a minute to review with you some elements of citing in APA format. I think when I was a graduate student for the first time using APA, I didn't understand that the italicized words and the commas and the periods and all of those types of abbreviations, I didn't understand how important they were. I kind of thought they were a suggestion or something that was just a good example. And after using MLA for so many years before that, when I got my first paperback, I think I cried when I got my first paperback because there were so many mistakes. So I try really hard to provide you with examples of APA. So this reference page here just emphasizes that you do use Times New Roman 12 and you double space throughout and you have a hanging indent. Now I know with Microsoft Word, sometimes you'll go to that second line and when you tab over, it shifts your entire paragraph, and that can be confusing. Just go back to the left-hand margin, hit return or enter, and then tab, and it will line up with the hanging indent better. So that's one tip. Another thing I wanted to share with you is, and this is a very, very, very minor detail, but you have the journal listed here in italics, and then your volume number is italicized, but your issue number is in regular font in parentheses. Now, very few people will catch this. I normally don't count off for this error, but because I am picky about myself and I want to do it right, I take very careful notice of those teeny tiny details in my own writing. And then retrieved from, and the website is listed afterwards with no period at the end, and there's no retrieved date. A lot of times one clue into plagiarism is that websites that no longer exist are used. And if I go in and I highlight your website and put it in the address bar on my computer and it will not take me to that source, that's a pretty good indication that that source doesn't belong to you. So then I also have examples here, a research publication and the format, a journal article and the format, a book that doesn't have multiple editions and the format, an online journal article that was probably published. As a matter of fact, it was published in text form, hard copy, but it was stored online at Liberty's library where I attended school. So because of because the source itself had page numbers listed, I listed the page numbers and the website. So that's a very particular detail there that is important. And then a book with an edition. So I have had students in the past print out this PowerPoint and just use it as a reference tool so that you have an example to go by when you do your own types of entries. So then I have an article from a book with an editor, but the article inside the book has a different author, and it was also posted online. And then I have other examples of books and other materials there as well. So I think examples are the very best way to learn how to use APA format. Now, this website may or may not work. I'm having problems with links, but if you go through the PowerPoint yourself and it does not take you to the website, you can highlight this address right here underneath my citation and put it in your web browser, and it will take you to the location. It looks like it's going to work for me this time. So this is a useful tool because it is telling you how to cite something you found on a website in APA style. So you can literally click on any of these types on this egg, so to speak, this over easy egg, and it will take you to the different examples of online sources. And I think that might be helpful for you. So that's why I included it in the presentation. And this is the link that I have worked all week to get to work, and it's not working. But this is a comparison of qualitative versus quantitative research on one website. Now the link, see, for some reason it is not working for me, but if I put it inside my web browser or in my address window, it works. And so this is just a blog that takes difficult language to understand and turns it into something we can read more easily. And I work well with charts and tables. I understand information when it's compared in a more graphic form rather than lengthy paragraphs. So this website does a nice job of describing qualitative and quantitative research. And even though the actual web address is .org rather than .gov. The sources that they use, such as Carl Rogers and B.F. Skinner, those are research-based sources. So I checked to make sure their sources were reliable, for example, here. I think this would be okay for you to use as a resource because I want this information to be easy to use and easy to understand because there's enough that is difficult about research because the research class tends to be difficult for most students. Again, the same thing happened with this link. I have not been able to figure out why. And so if you paste it into your address window, you can see that there's some really good advice about research methods, the differences between quantitative and qualitative in another format, again, with bold and color. And then this is very, very, very helpful. It says most common sources of quantitative data include surveys, observations, and secondary data. But then it also gives examples of qualitative data. And the difference in surveys for both is that in qualitative, they're open-ended questions. They come from the perspective, the perception of the person who is answering, whereas statistical observation or statistical surveys might be choose A, B, C, or D as the answer. So there's some clarifications there that are helpful. And so in previewing literature, I'm going to have to move you guys. You're blocking my PowerPoint slide here. So I just moved you to the bottom of my screen. You're still there. Step one in planning a research project, you identify a problem area or a broad area for study. And the example I used is teacher-student relationships. The next step is to examine the literature, which is what you will be doing this week in your literature review. You cannot go wrong using St. Thomas's online library. If you Google, you're going to run into a lot of things that are not appropriate, but it might help you narrow your topic. Identify a research question, a hypothesis, or a purpose. And this is going to become more and more important as you get your study together for your proposal and as you start to frame your research around what question you want answered in your study. So the empirical approach is based on observations. Why do we observe? It establishes the need for the study. When you start to speak about your study next week, you're going to explain the purpose of your study. Why do I need this study? And you are going to be observing someone doing something. You are actually doing empirical research in this proposal. Whom do we observe? This tells you, what does my population look like, or my sample size? Am I looking at all 8th grade students in the school district, or am I looking at one classroom of heterogeneously grouped 4th graders, or am I talking to all of the teachers in a rural high school? So the why and the whom come together to specify where this study is taking place and who you are talking with. How do we observe? This is when it gets a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more out of our comfort zone, so to speak. But this is where you have to decide what instruments you're going to use to gather the information. Is it test data? Is it observation data? And I will go ahead and tell you right now, if you're using qualitative methods to do your study, you need 3 sources of data to provide credibility. So you might observe students or teachers, you might survey them with open-ended questions, and you might actually look at their work, or you might talk to the teachers about the students, or talk to the students about the teachers in an interview format. So an interview is a way of gathering data in a qualitative study, and how you know it's qualitative rather than quantitative is that you don't have any answers for the people. You ask them the questions and you write down their narrative answers, or they write down their narrative answers, and when you analyze that data, you look for similarities or themes in that data. With quantitative surveys, you let them choose A, B, C, or D, and you already know what the potential outcome is going to be. So those are the 2 different frames from the quantitative and the qualitative approach. Then the other question that you ask is, when do we observe? Are you observing during a particular class period, a season of the year? The answers to these questions are based on your own research question. So the research question, you have a topic, which is the general area of study. For example, ability grouping in reading instruction might be an interest for me. The research question, where I take that general area and I specify, how does leveling for reading instruction impact students' reading ability? I want to know how it changes it. It could be, does leveling for reading instruction impact students' reading ability? That's a different frame of reference. That would be a qualitative versus a quantitative. But basically, you're trying to figure out, what difference does leveling make in reading instruction? So then when you go to your discussion board initial post this week, tomorrow night, it's asking you to compare qualitative and quantitative research along with the measures and data analysis tools for each. The websites that I gave you will help you with this answer. As a matter of fact, if you just go to those sites, they'll give you the answer. I almost teach this class as if you have no textbook, because sometimes people get bogged down in just reading and reading and reading. I would rather you go online, find outside sources, then go back to your textbook and skim through when you see something that aligns with what we're talking about. Because if you don't have a purpose for your reading, you will not, you won't engage with that material. So I kind of do things backwards that way, basically because I was a reading teacher and an English language arts teacher, and I know that my students will not purposefully read without a specific task in mind. So the biggest thing is, how has examining and evaluating this study prepared you to design your own? So one of the things that my students often do, and my peers also have had the same experiences when we first start doing research, is we choose qualitative immediately to avoid the math. So just so that you know, you can pay someone to do the math and to do the statistics. You can find a friend who owes you the favor if math is not your thing. You have to choose the method that fits the question. Because if you try to narrow yourself into a qualitative, your interest may not lend itself to not having the specific statistical data. So just be very careful of that. So on the discussion board, it should be organized. It should be smooth and logical. It should be written in a professional format, and it should have a resource. You should have a reference for your discussion. When you respond to someone else, I think this is where the glitch comes in, because it's so easy to go, I love your idea. It's awesome. I'm going to do this too, or I tried this. Reflect multiple perspectives and show value as a seed for reflection. I really like the way you talked about this, this, and this. I'd never experienced that before, and I think I might try it. What do you think about? So you're doing more than just telling the person that they're great, and they are probably great, because we have had some really strong posts this term, but you're going to stretch it into a reflection, make a suggestion, or ask a critical question, ask a hard question. And that is a seed for reflection there. And I know that there are only 5 points a week, but we only have 100 points in the term. So every discussion board is 5% of your grade. And really it can make a difference in the end if you take these discussion boards seriously and go the extra mile. If I see something is wrong in your discussion post and you turn it into me on time, I will give you a little hint in the in Speed Grader. And if you go back and add to what you have done, then you won't be penalized for that. But it's very difficult if the original post is not turned in by Thursday, because we're running out of time for feedback and turnaround. So generally, if your posting is not on time, you lose 1 point, and then out of 5, which is 20%. And then we address the rubric from there. So one thing that will completely confuse you when you look at this assignment this week is when you go to assignment 2, literature review, and you click on the research proposal guide, it is going to show you what the final project is supposed to look like. That is the entire week 5 assignment. So be very careful. And I've warned people before, but when you're busy and you're looking for things, you just follow the colored blue link and you pop it open and go, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing today. That's not what you're doing today. That's what you're doing throughout the term. What you're doing for assignment 2 within the research proposal guide is just the preview of the literature, section 1 of that entire guide. So that should make this whole class pay off, this whole Wednesday night meeting pay off, because I do have students who sometimes try to write the whole proposal and turn it in week 2. So my instructions are very explicit for the preview of the literature. This is probably the most lengthy part of the study, because you have to show that you've scanned multiple sources, and if you chose your 10 pieces of literature very well in your annotated bibliography, you're really just digging deeper in those resources. So would you like to see a typical example? No, you would not like to see. Okay, that's why you're on. Okay, look, I'm going to unmute you guys just in case you have questions, because I'm watching your lips, but I can't hear you. So I'm actually going to go back, hold on, to my files and pull up one at random. I remember a specific student who, she was actually a journalist before she came to St. Thomas. So all of her writing is just scary awesome. But let me see. I keep everybody's resubmission. Let me just type in lit here. I'm trying to choose a person's because I want it to be just like what someone turned in. So let me see. I saved this as the typical example. So let me see if it's the one I'm looking for. Hold on just a minute. Okay, this is the one that I was talking with someone about online. The actual contents of this literature review is excellent, but last term, we actually took out all of this part and then we put in the title page. So with the exception of the part that I just deleted, the literature review example that you have that says typical sample is correct. The key to writing an excellent literature review is to write by topic. So you read all of your literature and you say, okay, I've got 4 sources that mention this topic. I need to create a bold heading for that. You're not going to go article by article and give me a summary like you did in the annotated bibliography. You're going in to determine what the themes are that are jumping out at you. And then towards the end of your review, you're going to share with me basically what's missing. What is the literature not saying? The student who wrote this paper wrote on the impact of physical activity on student achievement. So the introduction basically tells us before the impacts of physical activity on academic performance in elementary schools can be evaluated, it's important to understand the you hear the journalist in that, right? She writes like she's been writing for a while. So the introduction just tells me this literature review is about, and then 4 or 5 main topics or main points that came out of your study. So in essence, it is going to tell me or tell the reader basically what was not covered, and the reason why will come. The reason why you need to do your study will come out of that. Does that help?
Yes.
The biggest thing is just the formatting. I didn't want to change her document because that's the way she turned it in, but in between, this is about the 12th time I've taught this class, so along about time 8 and time 9, I said this form is ridiculous. We need to start building the proposal so that when we get to the proposal, we aren't changing the format of everything. So her entry was still very strong, so I wanted you guys to be able to see that. And I have other examples as well if you need to see them, but I will probably send those in a PDF form so that the temptation to copy won't be there. So the pre-literature review is a lot of work for 10 points, right? It's a lot of research for 10 points.
Put your volume on, you won't hear her.
But I have to say that 10% of your grade it's great to be able to get these points, because not only is it 10 points out of the total, your proposal in the end will include your literature review. So it's actually counting twice. And if you do the literature review right the first time, you won't have to rewrite it the last time. So I think that knowing that when you write it the first time, it's going to count again at the end, I think it helps. So if you need help with style citations and different types of guides for APA, you can go to the STU EDU library for how to. It's very easy to use, and it's laid out so that most people can understand it. So all you have to do is look on the left-hand side and find out what it is you need. Cite sources is where you would go. That's when most people need the help. And then it gives you the style and citation guides, and it gives you examples. I mean, everything you need is there. So just be sure and use these sources here and not the MLA APA. But the library is laid out very user-friendly, so I think that would be helpful as well. And then there's the how to cite sources. So that's really all I have to share this week, unless you have questions. And if you do, I'll be happy to answer those. We have about 7 minutes left on our time.
With the style of the formatting, the only difference with the sample that you shown us was just the title page and the heading that she had. We shouldn't have it.
Yes, you use the same format of an APA document that you used last week with the annotated bibliography, with the running head and the title and all of that. And the reason why I want you to do that is because each part of this assignment is being turned in separately and independently. But then when you go back to create the full proposal, you'll just remove those title pages, and you can actually start stacking them together a little bit week by week. And there are a couple of narrative things that you'll add. But really what we're doing is we're working on a 4 weeks on the proposal, and at the end the proposal is done. So the assignment used to be a form that you filled out, and that's what she had done, is she sort of filled out the form. It was very confusing when it came time to turn it in as a final proposal, what went where and how to remove the questions that went with the form. So I said, let's just go in and do it in categories in a narrative format, and it makes it easier in the end.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna make sure I don't have anybody else on mute. Okay, do you have any other questions? Okay, I don't think so. Email me if you do have any questions. I'm happy to help. Remember that you are able to resubmit, but I've got to have a message from you so that I can delete it out of that assignment box. It's saved forever on the speed grader, but I have to remove it, so that's kind of like the Turnitin home base, and Turnitin can only have one assignment at a time per student. And so I think it's easier for them to do it that way. So if you turn something in and you want to resubmit, I can delete it, but I have to have your permission, because if you don't want to resubmit it, the final copy needs to stay. Okay? So did your feedback help last week at all?
Yes.
I know it's a lot. I know, and when you turn in this literature review, there'll be a lot of grammar on there, and you guys are going to go, oh God. But you'll get better, and you'll be better writers for it, and that's why we give the opportunity to resubmit, so that when you go to your next class, you're the best writers. And so I do have a lot of other professors that tell me that when the students get to them, they know how to write like graduate students. So that means that I might have something to do with that. I don't know. All right, take care. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.